The Grail Watch is one of the most interesting challenges that a watch enthusiast faces. On one hand, it teaches you a lesson about setting a goal and aspiring to get something truly special, to be ambitious in your pursuit, reaching this higher goal and doing whatever it takes to make it happen. But on the other hand, however, it can be incredibly negative. And you can be so fixated on this one goal to a point of obsession that you end up making really poor decisions to scratch that proverbial itch. And if you delve too deep into this area, your enjoyment of the hobby, well, it can be thrown out of the window. This video began with a simple idea of wanting to discuss the Grail Watch. What a foolish idea, because as you know, the deeper you get into it, the more complicated it gets. I wanted this video to be basic, it ended up being a little bit more complicated. So the more I've thought about it, instead of organically following this hobby, the many undulations that you end up enjoying, the Grail Watch, to me, I believe, is something that is more harmful to us than good. And boils down to so many factors, so many personal influences. Whether it's psychosomatic or a deep-seated issue that we have, I don't know. But pursuing the Grail Watch is something that we've all experienced. We could all be experiencing as of now. When it comes to watch collecting, our enthusiasm, sometimes it's just a bug in your ear that you need to get out. And we will do whatever we have to. So the Grail Watch, it's considered the end game. It's the thing that we aspire to own. The definition of Grail is quite loose. And I'll quote the Oxford Dictionary and I'll put it on the screen now, but I think it has to do with something about a pursuit, a relentless pursuit, for something that is hard to get. So the task of getting one, this Grail Watch, it's either possible after a lot of work, or it might be near to impossible. But it's the dream that so many of us fantasize about. It's the smoke that we chase, trying to catch it, with no thought about what we would do if we ever caught it. And we all have this lofty idea that when we finally attain the unobtainable, well, the hobby is complete. The journey is over, we can leave it and happily never buy another watch again. But never, it's a very long time. What makes the Grail Watch kinda cool is that there is no limit. When someone might aspire to own a Patek Philippe Nautilus or Audemars Piguet Royal Oak or a Regep, someone else might aspire to own a Zinn or a Seiko. Maybe it's a prized Omega or a Tudor or a Laurent Ferrier or a Breguet. In some cases, the concept of ownership, it's an ideal instead of anything concrete. Since we are not all pursuing the same watch, and instead of being on a collective journey that we can share, it actually ends up being one of the most personal journeys that we go on. And so our experiences in this area, they are all different. The stories that come out of it are just as nuanced. So where the title of this video could be quite inflammatory, I don't know, I haven't thought about it yet, it's important to say that pursuing a Grail Watch, it isn't a terrible thing. I'm not saying that hypothetically going after a 5370p is a bad idea. By all means, it's a powerful motivator to have a goal. And this hobby we enjoy so much, it propels us to explore. The Grail Watch, it can be a driving force that sits in the back of your mind for decades, but when does it start to get unhealthy? When our reach exceeds our grasp, where the weight of pursuing it affects our enjoyment of the experience? See, the greatest irony of all that I have learnt at least, is that the journey to the Grail Watch, it's often better than the final watch that you end up with. I could quote a man like John Goldberger, one of the biggest collectors, biggest enthusiasts out there. When he picks up one of the rarest Patek Philippe's of all time, let's say, for argument, a 1518 in steel, he enjoys the story of how he found the watch, of who he approached and where the journey led him, instead of necessarily owning the watch and wearing it, which I would imagine for this sort of example would only be worn a few times a year, if ever. The truth is, no matter where you are in this watch hobby, the goalposts will always move. What was once a Grail Watch for you 5 years ago is now happily on your wrist, and you are now looking in an entirely different area. So the two main things that the Grail Watch does to us enthusiasts that I don't think is necessarily healthy, it is something that is both distracting and it causes us to obsess over it. Let's start with obsession. I'm talking to watch enthusiasts, we know what it's like. We're probably the most obsessive people in the world. Our attention to detail, very specific elements on watches, regarding its size, how it fits on the wrist, the colorway, the straps you choose to wear with it, the time when it was made, the quality of the movement, the quality of the build. These are all forms of obsession, right? We love to obsess about the details, and we can very often have a laser-like focus when we're wanting a watch that's truly impactful and significant to us. We can be just obsessive about price, considering what we're going to sell to fund the next piece, rationalizing it to ourselves that we're making the right choice. All too often, we don't call this a hobby, we call it an obsession for a reason. It is painfully addictive, for the detail-oriented. But the reward coming out of that obsession can be infinitely more gratifying when you finally arrive at that result that you've been working towards. Enough with obsession, then let's go into distraction, which I think is the next step. To a fine degree, being obsessed with details, it's okay. It's when you get so obsessed with a watch that it becomes unhealthy, to an extent where it gets in the way of your day-to-day. You go above and beyond just planning, and you make highly irrational decisions on what you're going to do next. And I cannot overstate this more. Do not overspend on a watch. Do not go into debt buying into a watch. Don't do something in this field that you will regret, and it's sad to say that most of this comes from experience. When the obsession gets to such an extreme point that it clouds your judgment, and your enjoyment of the watch hobby fades because of it, that's when there is a problem. There is a severe problem. So what is the point of this video? I don't know. Maybe it's to say that any obsession, no matter what it is, can be unhealthy if it goes too far. It's perfectly fine to have a Grail watch, to aspire to own a watch that's out of your reach. But when that starts impacting your day-to-day life, when it starts impacting your judgment, and more importantly, when it affects the way you experience and enjoy watches, that's when you need to draw the line. We tend to believe that our time in this watch hobby is limited. I guess it is, if you really want to get deep and philosophical. Too often we're advertised to about chasing after the next thing, where the Grail watch is seen as the end-all, be-all. I think the ending, it shouldn't be definite. And this is what I've learned in my short time in this hobby. The only piece I've ever obsessed over was my first watch, the Seamaster Trilogy. A piece that I couldn't afford when it was new, and I waited 5 years until I could finally get it. Truth be told, since then, I have never set my sights so seriously on one particular watch. I discovered vintage field watches. I discovered Tudor, Zenith, the amazing history of the El Primero, Breitling. And just when I thought I was finished with collecting and wanted to hang up my boots and say, right, we're fine for the next 5-10 years, then I find an incredible Seiko that I genuinely think is one of the most beautiful watches that I have ever experienced. And if I think back, if I obsessed about, let's say, my Rolex, nothing else would have sufficed. I would have missed all of these amazing watches in between. Watches that I now appreciate far more than I ever thought I would. And the real joke of the matter is I wasn't pursuing any of these watches. They fell into my lap one way or another. They crossed my path. I thought they looked good, thought it'd be worth a try. Pursuing the Grail watch then, I think it should be taken with a pinch of salt. Because it puts you in a box. A very specific corrugated cardboard box. And once you have arrived at the watch that you've wanted, perspectives change. And you move elsewhere. And I think about it now in closing, maybe the only benefit that a Grail watch has is providing you with a goal. It centers you, gives you something to aim for. But in that general vicinity, there is so much more to look at. So we should not take the Grail watch seriously. We shouldn't be taking this hobby seriously. Like everything in life, it is a journey, it's an experience, and there is no definite one answer that's going to satisfy everything. So obsess about watches, learn everything you can about them. Find that niche that you can really appreciate and enjoy for your own reasons. And maybe when everything lines up and luck is on your side, something crosses your path, changes your entire perspective again. So I'd like to know your thoughts on the Grail watch. Do you believe it to be more harmful than helpful? Do you think it's something that's helped guide you in a certain direction? Has it in a way set criteria that you've been able to work towards? And most importantly, have you learned more about yourself through the process? So thank you as ever for taking the time to watch this video, and I'll see you in the next one.